Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So the rest of this presentation is focused on some practical steps and recommendations for those parents who would be concerned and would want to find out. Thank you. What are some Islamic strategies for for dealing with this issue of media? Now, these are suggestions, on the basis of the teachings of the ulama, of strategies they can take. But at the end of the day, when it comes to parenting, it's not there's no sort of guide which says that, okay, you need to do exactly step 1, step 2, step 3, and that's it, right? The way that Islamic parenting works is that you're given some principles, right? You're also given the ability to think and to observe. So as parents, what we need to do is we need to understand the guiding principles, understand where our children are at, and then apply the principles in the correct way. So it might be the case that for even though these are recommendations which generally speaking will be effective and work, we're not guaranteeing that they'll work in every circumstance, because there could be some unique sort of situations that are applicable in some child's case. Okay, so suggestion number one is to spend time with children. Okay, there is no substitute for a parent to spend time with their children. It's not okay to think that as a parent I can not spend time with my children and let media spend time with them, and everything's going to be okay at the end of the day. Right? The one-on-one time that we have with our children is extremely, extremely essential and extremely powerful. And in the long run, that is what is going to help us win this battle over those competing ideologies. Right? In fact, trying to replace it with something else is going to backfire, because what happens then, as I mentioned before, is that our children get used to using media as their friend or their friends or whatever it is, right? And they don't want us anymore, right? I have examples of parents who, their children have now hit their teenage years, and when they try to spend time with them now, because they made a mistake when it was earlier, their children kind of react in a negative way, and they know it's not a natural thing. It's very unnatural for them to spend time with each other. We have to ask ourselves, what is it that prevents us from spending more time with our children? Right? Honestly, we have to be honest with ourselves, right? And if we're honest with ourselves, sometimes we'll actually realize, for some of us, right? Some of us who are unfortunately not, performing our duty, I'm speaking for myself first and foremost, we realize that actually sometimes it comes from a lack of desire to do so, right? Because in today's generation, we also have been kind of swept away with this whole current, right? We're more comfortable. It's easier for us to also sit back and watch TV than it is to play with our children. Right? I speak to my fellow fathers in particular right here. After coming back home from a hard day at work, okay, you know how it is, right? What do you want to do? Right? You want us to get play blocks with your kids? You want to play sports with them? No, you want to kick back, eat dinner, and then just chill, right? To spend time with the children is very hard, right? On the weekends, we have so many things going on, majalis and invitations to people's home, and then majalis and so many things, right? That it's when do we have time to actually spend time with our children? Right? But the reality of it is that we must do so. If you look at the lives of our great ulama, one of the things that you'll see in their lives is specific time that they set aside to spend time with their kids. And at that time, it's just them and their kids. Shahid Baheshti, rahmatullahi alayh, he was involved in establishing the Islamic government. He was one of the main people who was responsible for setting up a whole government of a country. Okay, but it was a very busy person, right? One time, one of his aides calls him, very important issue to discuss, right? He says, "Assalamu alaikum, I need to discuss this thing with you. Sorry to bother you." He's like, I'm sorry, I'm spending time with my daughter working on her homework. Click. He puts the phone down. Right? This is my time with my daughter. Right? Allama Tawatawi's daughter, rahmatullahi alayh, she says that my father would be busy working on his tafsir. Right? He worked for years and years on tafsir al-Mizan. Right? In today's world, for something like that to be produced, first of all, it can't be produced. It's very hard to imagine that. It's something which is unique, okay? But if something like that is going to be produced, it's produced by a whole team of people. He did it all by himself, right? That's how he was very busy. She said that my father would spend time writing his tafsir, but every day there would be a time when he would spend time with us, right? This was our time with him. That's something that we need to learn from, right? And just like if we find that sort of initial hesitance to do so, inshallah, we'll find that after time, after doing it a few times, working on it, then we'll suddenly realize that, the same way that Allah created us with the ability to have children, He also created us with the ability to play with our children as well. Right? It's something which comes from God. We don't have to worry about it. It's not something that we need to read a book on or take a class on, right? I'm going to play with my kids. Okay, how do I play with them? Just be a kid. Just play, tasabu. Like the Prophet says that when you're with the kids, be like a kid. Okay, it's something that we just need to try. And inshallah, right? Again, if it's been some time, it might take a while for it to become natural. But after that, we'll see that it's something which we have the ability from Allah to do so. Children have a natural need to play. Okay, we see the Ahlul Bayt al-Islam playing with. This is a topic of discussion. Actually, it could be a whole seminar on what are the techniques that the Ahlul Bayt use to play with their children. It's very interesting. We have so many traditions on this. But one of the things we can learn from that is that for our children to be able to play at home is very important. Okay, to have an environment where they can play, even if we have to invest in that environment, right? Like one of the things that you can inshallah think about, right, is this that even the place that we're living in, right? If I need to move a little bit further away, but I can get a place which has room for my children to play in, right? Isn't that better than them being cooped up in a place where they can't play? Right? These, especially in Toronto, where we can have basements. In some places in other parts of North America, you can't even have basements. It doesn't work. Here we have basements. Why not get a place where you have a big basement where the kids can throw around a ball? Because for 4 months of the year, it's too cold to go outside. Okay, but basically having an environment where the children feel like, okay, when I'm at home, I can go play. It's not just the default is media, screen time. No. Another thing we need to also be promoting is the culture of positive reading. Okay, where our children see reading as something which is very good and very attractive. Now, of course, not reading just anything, reading things which are good and wholesome, right? But reading on the whole lacks some of those harms that screens have with them. Now, as parents, we need to be very aware of this, right? These days, you find a lot of push for making everything into a screen. Even in some of the schools, right? The reading at a very young age is done on the iPad, right? There's reading programs that you go through at home. You have to read from the iPad, right? But any parent knows, again, right? What is the effect of just giving a screen to a child? Right? And then sometimes you hear about the horrors of what happens when the child clicks on certain things, right? When they're not supposed to click on them, and then what happens how they get damaged at a very young age. One of the scholars who's done a lot of work in this area of tarbiyah, his name is Ustad Abbasi. He's a current scholar in Iran. He's an expert in this area. He says that reading is a competitor to negative media. However much a family becomes more tuned to media, they will distance themselves from the culture of reading. The more they read, the less media they will use. Okay. One of the people who's really promoted this culture of reading is Ayatollah Khamenei, Hafidahullah. Okay, so it's going to be the next slide after. Here it is. Okay, so he says that it's necessary to promote book reading in a society. I believe one of the worst and most harmful kinds of laziness is the lack of energy to read books. Then he says that certain people are used to reading books, but books that do not require thinking. Nothing's wrong with this. After all, this is a kind of reading. I would not deny this, but it is better to combine recreational reading, like reading novels, autobiographies, and easy historical books, with reading serious books, books that require thinking and careful study. Okay, now, speaking from experience, right, children do like fiction books, all right? But they don't. They like fiction books, but they'll like any fiction books as long as from the beginning, right? You are involved with that process. You choose interesting books that are appealing to them, right? But that lack the negative messaging. The other thing you'll see is that if you go to the library and you bring some fiction and some nonfiction, if you choose the right nonfiction, and you train your children at a young age to do this, they will also be interested in nonfiction as well. There's certain books, especially now, which are made, which are incredibly attractive for for young children. I'll give you an example. Like my children last year, they participated in the science fair where the theme was about outer space. Okay, now for a whole year, right, they have just been fascinated with like books to do with space, right? Anything about space, different spacecraft, different planets, whatever it is. My son, in one of his classes, he was given an assignment about like something to do with like facts and figures, right? Now he's fascinated with almanacs, right, where they give like interesting facts for kids. Like things like, I don't know, like do you know that if you eat enough carrots, then your skin will turn orange? I remember he was like very fascinated by that fact, right? So they do a really good job these days of coming up with like interesting nonfiction books for our children, which actually expand their horizon and their points of discussion. Like, you know, my kids, like they'll be reading that and they'll be very keen on like sharing what they learned then, like about these like facts and figures. So what we need to do is we need to invest in reading. We need to choose reading material carefully. Now, even to the point of this, like where if we can have a shelf which is dedicated for our books for our children, like it's one thing to go to the library and check out good books. That's fine. But one of the other suggestions is to also have books that your children own, right? Because there's a special sort of like pride that comes with like owning books. And then even have a nice shelf on a bookshelf or even a whole bookshelf that is your child's bookshelf, right? You'll see that there's a certain sort of pride that they take with that. And then those books which you find like have a very good messaging, you can actually buy those as well and invest in this as well. I've offered this advice to parents, and like just speaking from experience, anecdotal experience, like it does seem that it has an impact. You know, so this is a suggestion I'm offering to you parents as well. The thing about books is that they're a lot easier to filter than media, okay? Because you can go through it, right? And there's a lot of resources available to help you go through it and to identify what is the negative messaging. I'm going to give some of those resources, inshallah, in just a couple of minutes. We have to be careful, though. Like I said, I give you some examples of books from before. Some of the most popular books that our children read are filled with negative messaging, especially like the books that are being written like in current times. I'll give you an example of Diary of a Wimpy Kid. How many of you have heard of this series? Okay, so it's very common. Okay, if you go to the library, it's very common. Now, there's one book in that series that I've gone through. It talks about things like, going to a party and then doing spin the bottle at the party, where you spin the bottle and then the opposite gender person who's facing the bottle, you have to like then have a relationship with them, right? It talks about things like putting up fake pictures on social media of you and playing beach volleyball with like the opposite gender. It talks about fantasizing about having parties with like the opposite gender and these sorts of themes, right? Of jumping into like their sleeping bags, and this is the type of stuff which grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, like it's very common for them to be reading this. And I find this is something that which just shocks me, that there are parents, right, who they read maybe one of them and they're like, oh, this is cute, right? It's interesting. And then they'll buy, Shia parents, Muslim parents, they'll buy the whole set for their kids, right? Not realizing that our children read this with incredible interest and attention, right? They soak these messages in. And when it comes to this type of sensitive material about social interaction, social media interaction with the opposite gender and parties and those type of things, I don't know about you, but I speaking as a parent, right? Of course, we wouldn't be controlling that message. We want to be teaching our children what is the right way of approaching that. We don't want the author of this diary to be teaching our children how it is that our children should be interacting with the opposite gender. Reading time. One of the suggestions that's given by the ulama is to have times for the entire family to read. Let's everyone come together and have reading time. Right? We do different things as a family. One of the things that we do is that we have reading time. Everyone picks up a book and reads. Reading to children at bedtime as well. It's something which children can grow to love, like really, really like they look forward to that. Last sort of piece of advice is to have controlled exposure. Okay, is that when it comes to the dunya in general, and when it comes to media in particular, we have to be in control. Right? We shouldn't let the dunya come and take us for a ride. Right? We shouldn't let the media come and take us for a ride. We have to control that. We need to be in control. There is no need for our children to own devices. no need at all. Okay, this is a false statement that our children will be left behind in terms of technology if they don't have their own device. All right, I come from a tech background, right? I'm aware of like devices and all that. It's not something which is a requirement. When you look at the potential benefits of them having their own device versus the harms far outweigh the benefits. There are other ways of teaching them those things. If they need to use devices, let it be in a public forum. Okay, I know that we love our children. I know that we like to think very high of them. I know that we like to trust them. But having this type of trust where we give them a tool which is like a very, very effective tool of the shaitan, right? And tell them that go take it in your room and do whatever you want with it, that's not an effective tarbiyah strategy, right? It's asking for disastrous consequences. The Islamic approach towards tarbiyah is prevention before cure, right? Meaning that we need to take the necessary precautions to avoid giving them that type of access. There has to be particular care when it comes to using search engines and YouTube. I can't tell you the number of times that my children have searched for things like innocent things, like if you search for and they see like negative things. You search for Caillou. Caillou is like a kids show. If you search for it on YouTube, you'll see that there's spoofs done on Caillou where they show all this horrible like violence and like all these other sort of things. Right? Now imagine like when one of our children thinks they're watching a Caillou cartoon and then they click on one of those things, right? What are they going to see? Even other sort of cartoons and those type of things, sometimes you'll be searching for it and then the stuff that comes up on the side is very horrible types of messaging and horrible themes. Aside from the spiritual effects, right, there's even worldly effects. This is from a very interesting 2010 study that was done. It shows how, unfortunately, like, the thing doesn't show, but basically, over here, it shows if when somebody is when a child is a heavy user of the media, you have 51% of heavy users of media have good grades. But when they're light users, they have 65%. When they have heavy users of media, there's 47% who have poor grades, and then 23%, if they use it lightly, have poor grades. Okay, so it's been shown statistically that I mean, again, these type of statistics are tough to see, right? Because it could be when a correlation. It could, it's just saying that it's suggesting that there's a correlation between when you have less media usage and then higher grades. Okay, even when it comes to other things like this one right here, heavy media users, they have roughly a 20% low level. 20% of them report a low level of contentment. Okay. On the other hand, light media users, they report a 10% level of low personal contentment and 22% of high personal contentment. So the gist of this is that if you look at the light and the heavy, it's opposite statistics, meaning that those who use media less, they're the ones who are happy, and those who use media more, they're the ones who are not happy. Right? Again, these are just statistics, right? And this is what it's correlating the type of things that we've learned from our imams and the principles of tarbiyah that they're teaching us, right? That even the academics, the emotional state of our children seems to be affected by the media when it comes to these type of studies. You see that as well. Just the last two slides, right, is that when it comes to media, like one of the things I would suggest to parents is to resist social pressure, right? If everyone else, right, is giving their children an iPhone, giving them an iPad, right, it doesn't mean anything when it comes to what I have to do, right? Since when is following the majority a standard for what we do, especially followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim Islam? Right? We pride ourselves on doing what's right, no matter what. Okay, so we can't cave in. Okay, everyone in public school has an iPad. So what? Okay, doesn't mean that my children have an iPad. Okay. The other thing is to be 2 steps ahead of our children. We need to be very aware of the technology that they're using. If they're using Snapchat, we should understand everything about Snapchat before that. If they're using Minecraft, we should understand Minecraft. Right? We should be there, and along the way, and they'll appreciate that, and also be a way of being aware of what's going on. Watching and playing with our children. Right? This is something which is a very effective technique. Okay, they want to play a new game. Okay, let's play it. Let's play it together. And then choosing peer groups wisely. The thing which will influence our children's media intake more than anything else is what their friends are watching. Okay, this is very important. My advice to parents is that even if it means redefining who our friends are, who our close friends are, who we spend time with, whose houses we go to, who we go camping with, right? Even if it means redefining that and finding new friends, it's worth it when it comes to our kids. We need to be close with people who have the same goals and the same policies when it comes to media. Otherwise, it's not going to work, right? Because my child is going to hear from his friend that they went to like the opening thing of this movie, right, and that movie, and then they watch this at Netflix at home, and they have this type of devices and these type of games. Now, obviously, if I deprive my children of that, they're going to feel left out. They're going to be always hearing about it from their cousins or their friends, right? So I need to choose my peer groups wisely. Last thing I would just give is some suggested resources. One of them is if you go on this link right here, there's a document. It's a work in progress of some suggested media and books for children. If you'd like to take a look at that, then it's a resource for you. The other one is the Iqra Book Club. It's something that we've started at Wali al-Asr schools, Wali al-Asr school, which is an alternative to the scholastic reading. It's called Iqra reading. And basically, according to certain criteria that we've established, we have a team of people who go through and try to find books for children, both Islamic books and then even books written by non-Muslims, fiction books, but that are safe, that are sound for our children. And this is something that we've opened up to anybody, even those who are outside of the school as well, to participate in. You can even just get the names of those books as well and look at them as a possible thing for your children to read. The other resource that I would mention is a website. It's called Common Sense Media. It's a very good website where they'll go through and they'll have parents review different media, and they'll be looking for certain things like violence and suggestive themes and sexuality and gore and these type of things, and they'll actually tell you what's wrong with a movie when it comes to those things. All right, so it's a good idea to look at that, and you can kind of preview media with that. But my advice to you is that don't just rely on that, because they're looking for these things, right? But they're not looking at like the themes, the ideology. That's something that you have to be in charge of. You have to be looking for. Like on Frozen, if you notice, the examples we gave weren't about those type of things. It was about the ideology of individualism that was being pushed to the person who was watching it. We ask Allah Ta'ala to accept these efforts, to guide us to the best way of raising our children in a way that is pleasing to the Imam of our time. Inshallah, I pray that this is something which has been a beneficial experience for everyone. There'll be an opportunity, inshallah, to ask questions, share your feedback later on. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin.